judge your forms and few shines beyond all known.
Hi everybody, welcome to Artists United Television. This is Holly Million, the founder and executive director of Artists United. Artists United is a nonprofit organization based in Oakland, California, working throughout the United States and worldwide. Our mission is to empower individual artists to create excellent art and to unite all artists to create social change. Our organization is 2 years old, and in this time we have launched our programs. The programs include our online educational program, which encompasses Artists United Television and other online content. We also do artist networking events in cities all around the United States, and we've even done some outside of the United States, including in Spain, Namibia, and most recently, China. We're building an online platform to help unite our 32,000 members so that they can begin communicating with each other and sharing resources. Our vision is to create the largest movement and largest network of artists in all disciplines that the world has ever seen. And we also have other programs. We'd love to, if you have a skill or knowledge that you like to share with artists, we have a consulting team that we recently launched, and we like to feature people that have resources that could assist our members. Today we have a very special guest that has been connected to me through our board of directors. One of our members, Michelle Wolf, made the introduction to Tracy Rosenberg recently. And we had a wonderful dinner in San Francisco, and I have been a fan of Media Alliance for many years, Tracy, and it was so great to meet you. And we're very proud that Media Alliance is now a partner organization of Artists United. We have over 70 partner organizations that do cross-promotion, and we recently did an event with you with your co-sponsorship in San Francisco, so it's wonderful to have you on the show today. I know you're going to talk about some very important advocacy issues for artists to be aware of, and so I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm wondering if you could just start the conversation today just telling a little bit more about yourself and about Media Alliance.
Oh, sure. Hi, Holly, and thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here, and it's been great to sort of get familiar with Artists United work and your mission, which is ambitious and wonderful. So a little bit about our organization. We're one of the longest running media advocacy organizations really in the country. We may be the actual oldest. I'm not sure. I say that with sort of a question mark. I don't know of an older one, but I haven't absolutely tamped it down. So we're 41 years old this year, founded in 1977. And Media Alliance sort of came into being with the idea that journalists and communication workers and documentarians, people that were trying to get information out in the world, really needed to be more connected to some of the social change movements and social justice movements that were going on in the country at that time. There was kind of a void or a lack of connection that was sort of impeding the quality of the information that was getting out. So people got together in San Francisco to kind of talk about how can we do that? How can we do it well? And of course, it was the 70s, so Woodward and Bernstein had just happened. So people had a very, shall we say, glamorous and idealistic idea about what sort of journalism and information could do. It could topple governments, it could root out corruption. And of course, 40 years later, we still have a little corruption going on, just a bit. And we in our work have very much shifted to doing what we call sort of policy or platform work, which is not so much concentrating on people and professions, but concentrating a whole lot on the platforms that we're kind of using to talk to each other and what the rules of the road are on them, who owns them, who controls them, what's the basis in which we all participate when we talk to each other, and how does it need to change?
Well,
if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And because I'm a documentary filmmaker and I have experience dealing with government entities and filmmaking, and also just the kind of obstruction that you come up against, I know why it's so important that those platforms be open and free and unencumbered. And nowadays we all depend on the internet. So I'm assuming that the internet is one of the areas where you're pioneering some work in advocacy. What is there something specific that you can tell us about?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's kind of the area. We do a little bit of legacy work with radio and television, which are sort of called legacy media at this point. They're there. But percentage wise, really, digital platforms of various kinds, social media, the internet per se, is 85% of the action, at least. So there's a number of things that we're sort of working on in that area, but one of the biggest, and obviously it's in the news right now on in a major way, is net neutrality. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a bit, because when it comes to artists, I think it's one of the most, close to home of these sort of platform and policy arguments. I mean, it's right up there with copyright. It's integral to the work that artists and entrepreneurs do. And we're really at a kind of a critical situation. Now, I've been working on this for some 15 years, back when you would say net neutrality and people would go, what on earth are you talking about? We're not at that point now. John Oliver's happened. Everybody knows.
Not necessarily, Tracy.
Okay.
I'll tell you the truth.
Okay, lots of people know.
Lots
of people know.
I know a little bit, but I still feel like I'm not totally clued in on all the nuances of it. And I have brought it up to some people and they go, what do you mean? I thought the internet was free and open. I'm like, well, it is right now.
Dear God, after 15 years of advocacy, that's so sad. Just goes to show you, we always have a long way to go. Okay, so let me kind of start there, and then I'll sort of talk us into the current situation and sort of what people need to do to make sure that we end up where we need to end up.
That sounds great. That's great.
Okay, so network neutrality is basically the principle that each bit and byte of data travels through these networks and platforms on a sort of equilateral basis. So what kind of content it is and essentially who's sending it doesn't really impact its passage through the network. This is important simply because the alternative, which is what we call a pay-to-play internet, would be a situation where we would essentially have fast lanes and slow lanes on the internet. And this would, of course, be very lucrative for the owners of the internet, those internet service providers that we pay every single month, because if there's an extra or an added ability to speed up or prioritize your content and you can afford it, you're going to take it. And if you can't afford it, you're going to find yourself a little kind of shuttled off to the side, because they've done studies that essentially if websites and content doesn't load in a timely manner, people just leave. And you've seen that. You go to websites, they don't load. The pop-ups don't go away. These kinds of things happen and you just leave, right? Because there's a million websites out there and you can go somewhere else. So if we create a sort of a prioritization system on the web, then we're creating a situation where small businesses, artists, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, people without significant resources are really going to find themselves on the short end of the stick. And in a time and a place where we don't really have alternatives. We're so heavily dependent on the internet to meet our audiences and to deliver our content that there really is basically nowhere else to go. So net neutrality is the basic principle that says the internet, that as we've understood it and as it has largely worked over the past 15 to 20 years, will be sort of the protocol going forward, that we will not, flip into a financially segregated sort of multi-class internet. And this really shouldn't be controversial. And largely it's not, in the sense that about 85% of the American population basically agrees with what I've said. They want the internet to continue as it has been. They don't want to experiment with a fast lane and slow lane, prioritized system. And of course, in a democracy, when 85% of the population wants something, that's how it should be. I mean, that's sort of the basic of political organizing, except that there's a thing called special interests and there's a thing called large companies, and there's a disproportionate influence on the powers that be. So we have a situation where we've been going back and forth literally since 2010, so that's now 8 years, with net neutrality protections being formulated, then being sued, then being reformulated, then being repealed. The internet itself has largely not changed because we've always been in some process of implementation or lawsuit or repeal. But the policy basis has been really like a yo-yo, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So the latest round is that in 2015, the Federal Communications Commission, which oversees the internet, formally passed regulations saying that net neutrality was ensconced as the law of the land, and that the internet would continue largely as it has been. It's important to understand the internet is neutral as a platform now, literally 99% of the time. There are some exceptions. There have been some errors and mistakes and things that have gone down. We've had text messages that have been kidnapped. Netflix has been throttled from time to time. But these are individual incidents. So the majority of the time we interact with the internet on a neutral basis, and that's how our content is handled. So in 2015, it was like, okay, we're going to keep on going as we're going, as we have been going. But in 2017, of course, many things happened, like that president. And the FCC sort of came under the control of a former Verizon lawyer named Ajit Pai. And he came to a different conclusion, which is that basically an internet that was pay for play would be very, very profitable for everyone concerned. And if the ISPs were able to draw income from prioritizing traffic, they would invest that income in better, faster, stronger networks, and we would all be happy. So he went ahead, despite sort of opposition from about 85% of the population, and repealed the 2015 order in December of 2017. Not popular. Some people would say he's been the most hated man on the internet. That could be. And a number of things happened. 22 state attorney generals have filed suit. What we call a congressional review authority, which is a situation where Congress steps in to say to an agency like the FCC, we are going to overturn what you did because it's that bad. That has passed the U.S. Senate. It has not passed the House, and we will have to see if it does. We're struggling. We're still about, 30 votes short, but we're working on it. Every single Democrat in the House is on board. We have to dig up another 30 or so Republican votes, and it's difficult. But in the Senate, we were able to get 2 Republicans to flip over. And here in California today, I think, as a matter of fact, the California legislature is considering statewide net neutrality just for California in a bill authored by Scott Wiener. And of course, statewide net neutrality is an odd concept because the internet is not really divided up by states, but because the federal government has been so weird, we've basically been forced to kind of consider it. And of course, if California does it as the literal home of the internet and a big, large, influential state, it will impact the operations in other states. So we're hoping that the California legislature will go forward today. But I have been to the Capitol. I was there on Monday, and you can't move without tripping over a lobbyist from AT&T, Verizon, or Comcast. I was literally surrounded, like in an elevator, by about 25 of them.
Oh.
I mean, just the volume is genuinely shocking. That's what they're doing with your payments. Really, they are hiring an armada of people to just blanket the Capitol. So that said, we'll have to see how that vote goes. I'm never entirely optimistic when we're fighting AT&T type folks. But that's sort of where we are. And it's been an interesting political process because you would think that when you've got 80% support from the U.S. population, that ought to be enough. It's a super super majority, super plurality. And yet you start to see the sort of the fissures and the holes in our political system that's just not enough.
No, I'm so glad that you're there. It's too bad that the ratio isn't reversed and it's 25 people like you in the elevator with one Verizon representative. It would be a much better
Wouldn't that work for you?
scenario.
Oh,
I
yeah.
really wish so. And it sounds like at the moment, the net neutrality still prevails while this is hanging in the balance. Is that correct? So we're kind of holding our breath to see where this lands.
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I mean, technically it has been repealed formally, but because there are lawsuits in process, essentially the telecoms are not taking actions to sort of change the status quo. And part of the reason for that is the premise of the lawsuit is if you let this go forward, then bad things will happen. So it's important for their defense that they don't demonstrate and document all those bad things happening. So as long as the lawsuit is going on, we're kind of expecting no major change.
Okay, well, let's keep our fingers crossed that it drags out a little bit longer. It's also been it's very clear to me that it's important for Artists United as an organization to be working with organizations like Media Alliance, because early on when we formed, we were talking about the vision of the future being able to harness the network of artists to be able to assist with advocacy just like this, because what we find is similar to what happens with the constant budget issue that comes up around cutting the budget for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting or National Endowment for the Arts. It's always a scramble, and we have to, those of us who are in favor of that continuing always are in reactive mode, right? So you have to be proactive and you have to be organized. And there's definitely a desire to assist and support. Is there something that Artists United members can do to help with the effort that you're leading to maintain net neutrality?
Yeah, well, it's genuinely important because those other items that you mentioned, which I've participated in, campaigns to protect federal funding and CD funding and those kinds of things, and protect the National Endowment for the Arts, have been largely online campaigns. So we have been essentially using the internet to protect the federal investment in the arts that funds so much of people's work. So net neutrality really provides us that platform in order to be able to organize and to mobilize, in addition to be able to sell and show our work, which is pretty kind of fundamental stuff. So in a sense, we are protecting the way that we protect ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
In terms of in terms of what people can do, I've always found that one of the most effective ways to talk about the net neutrality situation is because, look, I mean, I'm an activist, and the reality is politicians hate activists. And the idea that we're preserving this network so we can pester them more is not always the most appealing prospect. But those who are using the internet to conduct businesses and to share artistic visions are in some ways much more sympathetic figures. So I think that, it's been enormously helpful for people who are creating small businesses, who are distributing documentaries, to just sort of speak up, because it doesn't really take that long to sit there and go, okay, how many ways do I use the internet? What does it help me to do? If I were shuttled to a slow lane, how would that screw me up? Those are really simple questions to answer. And you can certainly check in with a number of advocacy organizations. Honestly, you can really post this stuff. You can post it on your Facebook feed. You can post it on Twitter, and you can sort of share it and get it out. And these kinds of things are helpful, because when you do a lot of advocacy work, there's often kind of a rut with, the usual players who show up to kind of argue these things. And it really helps when people, sort of come in with a fairly fresh perspective and just say, look, I haven't been arguing this point for 10 years or 15 years. I don't lobby my government on a weekly basis. But I need to tell you that if the internet changes in this way, it's going to hurt me. And here's how. It's going to make it hard for me to do my work. It's going to make it extremely difficult for me to earn a living. And, and I need you guys to understand that, because you're not me, Congress will continue, but I won't be able to do what I do. And here's why. So, so to the extent that people can do that, or organizations like Artists United can collect those kinds of testimonials, that's a huge advocacy tool, and it really helps us all.
Oh, we're happy to do that, Tracy. I will definitely get right on this. I'll work with you on that. We'll send this out to our membership. We'll get people to give their personal testimony, because I want to emphasize to those watching the show that net neutrality is not a laughing matter, and it's something that we all depend upon. And so it's very good that organizations like Media Alliance are on the front line. We need to step up, and we need to use our power as artists and our voices to get behind organizations. So what Tracy's saying is absolutely correct. It also reminds me, you said that you may be the oldest organization in the country doing this kind of work. And at first I was like, well, there's one other I can think of, Cartemquin Films, Gordon Quinn's organization. We did an interview with Gordon Quinn that's part of our Artists United television series. And Gordon has been doing the work for 40 years. So you edge him out by a year, Tracy. I think.
Oh my God.
but that's another ally. And so I'm putting that word out to you, that's another organization. And Gordon has done so much on behalf of saving public media. And so that we need to know each other, and we need to know who our allies are. And then all the mass members of the organizations have to know that it's up to them also to step in and use their voices.
Definitely.
So Tracy, I know you have another advocacy issue that you want to share with the members of Artists United. What would that topic be?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think we've all heard the expression fake news, and sort of some of the sort of censorship issues that are kind of following in its wake, because I know artists are always, for reasons that are totally obvious, super duper sensitive to issues and concerns about censorship. And we're having a really, what I would call sort of a tortured and a confused public conversation, largely led by the commander-in-chief, who says a lot of really strange stuff. And I think it is, I think it's having a lot of impacts on sort of the freedom of speech and freedom of expression sectors that we pay an awful lot of attention to. And historically, artists are always on the leading edge of these things, because artists are always bumping up against whatever restrictions on freedom of expression sort of start to factor, because there's always an artist or two that's at the edge there pushing up against those boundaries. And I think it's a really interesting time. I mean, obviously, this is an old conversation. It's been going on for hundreds of years. But we're sort of at a particular juncture right now where the meanings of things, I think, are genuinely kind of shifting. And we're finding an awful lot of polarity in our country about, what truth is and where the boundaries are. I think to an extent that is almost unparalleled in my lifetime that I can remember. I mean, when you talk to people who, shall we say, are on the opposite side of the political fence from you, I think all of us have kind of noticed that the distance is further and further than it used to be, and the ability to find common ground is increasingly kind of difficult. I mean, I think everybody sees that in all of their dealings with sort of their networks and contents. So it's not as clear an advocacy point as something like net neutrality, where there are sort of processes in place and a thing that's going on that you can participate in. But I thought it was an interesting subject to kind of talk about, because I can't imagine that anyone who is not doing sort of edgy, provocative artwork isn't sort of thinking about this now, because we have a situation where what we call sort of deplatforming, which is basically the scenario where technology companies and venues basically say, you have crossed that line, we are taking you off of our platform, has really become something that's becoming more and more widespread, both on, the right-hand side of the political spectrum and the left-hand side of the political spectrum. It's in both. And so it becomes a really almost a gauntlet in some ways. And I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure coming in for a kind of self-censorship not to cross over those lines on both sides. And it's hard to make edgy, dangerous, provocative, creative, brave art if you're just sort of checking yourself, because if you cross that line, that's it, right? So I think it's an interesting challenge, and I think one of the things that I would hope that Artists United might be talking about and thinking about is how do we deal with these actual real threats? I mean, certainly with tech companies like Facebook and Google, they're getting involved more in sort of where do we draw the line? Where do we censor? Where do we deplatform? And we know that they've made some horrible mistakes and that they've done some things that seem absolutely crazy, like the historic picture of the Vietnamese girl running from napalm Agent Orange was taken off of Facebook as a pornographic picture. It's not a pornographic picture. It's a piece of historical.
It's also documenting the atrocities of war and the impact on a child. She's a child in the photo. She's naked. She's ripped off her clothes because they were burned off with a napalm, and she's running because she's in pain. Yeah. It's like, can you possibly interpret a piece of documentation any further from what it is?
Yeah, so these judgments are kind of nuts, and if you're talking about an artistic piece, who knows how it's going to be interpreted? So these kinds of things are scary. And so the issue of sort of, actual deplatforming and what that's going to look like in the future and who's making these decisions and on what basis they're making them. And also, the whole issue of kind of self-censorship in an era of sort of, I guess, fear or oppression or concern of some kind. What do you do or not do as artists when you have to worry about this, and how does that impact your work?
It's aversion, like conflict aversion. It creates this sense of I'd like to just save myself from unnecessary pain, right? So it's a self-censorship. It's a risk aversion. So
yeah, we often refer to it as kind of the chilling effect. That's like a legal term when they talk about it in court. But, it's the same kind of thing. Will people do what they would have done absent these kinds of circumstances and these kinds of pressures? And I think when you're talking about creativity, which is a heavily sort of, it's a complex process, and it includes both conscious and sort of unconscious worries and concerns. When it goes well, I think that's even more profound.
Yeah.
In other words, self-censorship can really factor in all kinds of ways, and not all of them are necessarily, documented and totally upfront.
There's not much you can do to document it, because again, it is sort of subtle, and it's sort of personal, and it's closed. It's like enclosed in the individual, right? But it's good that you're bringing it up, because we all have to be aware as artists when we are self-censoring, because that defeats the purpose of being an artist. The whole point is expression of things that need to be expressed. And I'm glad you're bringing this up also, because in addition to the subtle things, there's the overt things. And there is a lot of censorship or violation of people's First Amendment rights, that we're in the age of artists being censored, or filmmakers being stopped from gaining access to government documents. So this is one of the reasons why partnership is so important with organizations. And Artists United has a partner organization called First Amendment Coalition. They have a free legal hotline. Yes. They set up the free legal hotline for journalists who were facing First Amendment challenges for their work. And Artists United approached them and said, would it be possible to expand access to that legal hotline to artists who are also facing First Amendment challenges? And First Amendment Coalition agreed. So they expanded the hotline to Artists United members. So if you're listening, Artists United members get priority access to this hotline. There are attorneys standing by pro bono who will answer questions related to First Amendment issues. There's an online forum. You would go to firstamendmentcoalition.org, and you can let them know you're an Artists United member, and you'll have the ability to use that hotline. So, and Tracy, I'm sure that they would be happy to expand that to Media Alliance as well. So I'm happy to connect.
Actually, we are members.
You are? Okay, good.
Yes, we are, and we've used that hotline service, largely in the sort of journalistic capacity. But as I've said, the lines between journalism and artists who do political work is, that thin. And many of the issues and concerns are the same. And we have members across, all across that spectrum.
So,
well, this is great. So I'm glad that I gave you the opportunity to talk about the First Amendment hotline. That's terrific. It's a great service. And yeah, and I hope that, some sort of, dialogues about some of the challenges that are coming up in this period of time might be something that within your kind of network starts to happen.
We're very happy to do it. Happy to help spread the word. Happy to have you here, Tracy, also educating people. You've done this for such a long time. It's so important what you're doing. Thanks for taking those trips to Sacramento and representing us all. Thanks for coming here today. I want to just remind people you can visit the website for mediaalliance.org for more information about the work that they're doing. I want to thank Tracy Rosenberg for being here today. If you'd like to find out more about Artists United, you should visit our website at artistsunited.net. That's artists, plural, united.net. If you sign up on our website, on our email list, you'll become a free member of Artists United. You'll join 32,000 other people worldwide who have been joining the movement. And if you'd like to help us in other ways, there's ways you can do that. You can donate. We are a 501c3 charity. You can hit the donate button on our website and make a tax-deductible donation. You can volunteer. We have networking events that you can come and meet other artists. And if you'd like to be on Artists United Television, if you have information you'd like to share with other artists, there is a way to do that. Just contact me after the show. And I'd like to thank Tracy one last time. Tracy, have a great day. Thanks for being on the show. So glad to see you.
You too. Thanks. Thank you so much. It was great to spend this time together. And let me just spell out the website, MDIA-ALLIANCE.org, because you need the hyphen in the middle to find it.
Thanks for clarifying, Tracy. We're glad to have you, and everybody go check it out. It's really important work that they're doing.